this is an hour with me. I mean, not a full hour. It might be like 55 minutes or like 57.30, but we're going to hang for a bit, and I promise this will be less of a TED Talk. It won't be a straight reading. Actually, it will be kind of like a TED Talk, but like without the TED. So, nope, that didn't work. That was way funnier in my head. A tea talk. Oh yeah, I used to want to have like a radio show called The Tea Party, and then like in 2008, that name became very unsavory. So anyway, today's topic, because I like to have topics, because I know sometimes people come up and they'll just read their work. That's boring. Also, my books are short, so if I was to read for an hour, we'd get through the whole thing, and we'd still have time for Q&A. Or a dance party. We could definitely do a dance party. There we go. But instead I pick a topic. And so we're going to do why you should never, under any circumstances, lock eyes with a muse unless you're emotionally prepared to spiral, publish a novella, and develop a caffeine addiction. Because all of my books, or not actually all of them, of the 17 I have available, the last 4 were inspired by for real peoples. And that made writing really easy, but it also made our future interactions somewhat awkward. But a little background about me. So I'm originally from this tiny little town in the middle of the country called Chicago, Illinois, and it's fantastic. And the fact that the way I learned about Chicago is they had a big map of the continental United States. You had like Maine and like Florida, and then like the other stuff, the part you fly over in the middles, and then the stuff on the other side. But right there, right by the Great Lake that kind of hangs down. Yeah, is this on CVG-TV? Yeah, super sweet. So the part of the Great Lakes that kind of like you know, there's like Superior, like towards the top, and then there's like Erie and Huron and the other ones. But then, yeah, that one right there, right there at the fun part, that's Chicago. So now you all know geography, and you're good to go. But growing up in Chicago didn't mean anything. I was into all the wrong stuff. I liked Doctor Who, I liked Wonder Woman, I liked Star Trek. I still like Doctor Who, I still like Wonder Woman, I still like Star Trek. But at that time, which is a lot longer ago than I like to think about, that was incorrect. This is fun. I never sit at these things, so I'm going to keep sitting. But I didn't know they were incorrect until a lot of other people told me. They used sign language. It wasn't ASL, though. It was the kind that leaves black eyes and broken teeth and that kind of thing. And that's kind of sad, but this is going to be a fun panel. I was bullied for those tastes, which I know you're looking at me now like, what? You were bullied? No way. A guy who wears 1930s suits and talks about Wonder Woman? He was popular with all the kids back in the 70s and 80s, of course. But no, also I realize I don't look like the kind of person who has a favorite Motley Crue song. It Could Start My Heart, by the way, because they say ass not once but twice, right in the middle of the bridge. I also have a favorite Sex and the City character, Charlotte, because she's always right. I will fight and die on that hill. Well, I won't die on that hill, but I'll set up a picnic. Anyway, I fell into broadcasting by accident. So I know if you read the description for this panel, it talks about my adventures in broadcasting. I was in a band that was on the road for 2 years. We're trying to be rock stars. It didn't quite work out that way. So I came back, got a job working in a little television studio. We were sweeping floors and rewinding tapes. And yay, everyone in here is old like me, so I don't have to explain what tapes are. And I thought, after working in broadcasting, which was news, I could just walk across the hall, literally walk across the hall at NBC Tower, and just submit my pitch for a television show. It did not work that way. So instead, I just kept writing all these ideas for this one character, and then different scenarios and different settings and all this other fun stuff. And eventually, 13 years later, my friends were kind of sick of me talking about this show idea, and they said, you should just put out a book. You should get this published. You should throw it out there. So I did, and then we fast forward to now, and I haven't stopped writing. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, talking point number 1. I have notes this time. Sometimes I just riff, but I respect you all. You guys are gorgeous. Scale of 1 to 10, solid 98's all he is. Like the fact that you're upright and not limping from a good night of cartoon watching or whatever adults do late at night when they're alone is a testament and how much I appreciate you being here. Because I know after a really good night of cartoon watching, it sometimes takes me a little while to bounce back. Talking point number 1, what is a muse? A muse is not some soft-spoken woodland nymph whispering sonnets into your ear. Nope, she's a time thief. She wears heels sometimes. She's a soul burglar with eyebrows too powerful to ignore. And if she texts you the word hey, well, you're going to write 40,000 words and cry twice, which takes us to a great example. So my first muse, the first time I decided to use a technique called roman à clef, which is really just a fancy way to say I took someone's real persona and then fictionalized it to make it easier, was for a novella I wrote called All the Blue is Beige. And All the Blue is Beige. I'm not going to use any real names, even though they're not here, or they could be here. I guess I could use their real name and just tell you they're their fake names, and you'd have no idea. Fuck, should have thought of that. Anyway, we're going to refer to her as Dark Queen of Chaos. And so Dark Queen of Chaos is not her real name. I am trying to stay unsued and unslapped, but she's the woman who inspired All the Blue is Beige, which is a novella so full of longing and wine-stained late nights and poetic metaphors. It might qualify as a fire hazard, or at least if you're lactose intolerant, the amount of cheese would just severely fuck you up. So she didn't walk into my life. She kind of floated in on a jazz riff, and she made eye contact once, and then my brain said, quote, and I'm quoting my brain, because that's the thing, "Shut up, we're gonna be writing for the next 3 months," which is what I did. So the premise of All the Blue is Beige is it's a post-apocalyptic science fiction story based loosely on my love of W.E.B. Du Bois. So a lot of people might be familiar with him. If you're not familiar with him, that's cool. Trump's the president. You don't need to know stuff anymore. But if you're curious, he was an awesome black innovator, writer, activist, politician, poet, genius guy. But he also wrote one of the first science fiction stories called The Comet back around the turn of when the 20s were turning into the 30s in the 1900s. And the premise of The Comet is there is a black man and a white woman who are the last people alive in Manhattan after a comet has struck the city, and they're trying to survive, but also dealing with the racial politics, which if you're unfamiliar with history, black dudes and white chicks, as much fun as we have with them now, it was a little bit different back in the 20s and 30s. And so I just kind of wanted to fast forward that because I love that story, and I love the idea of not being post-apocalyptic in the truest sense, as in something bad has happened, but rather the ongoing apocalypse, where it's still in progress. So the city is being destroyed, and here we have our protagonist and an antagonist, and they're going to fall. And I am going to warn you, I'm starting heavy, but I promise it gets light as the hour goes on. So this is just an excerpt. I also am going to break the rules a little bit. I know you're not supposed to read from the top of your books when you do a reading. You're supposed to be something in the middle. That's usually the rule of like, you don't read the beginning, you don't read the ending, just give them a nice little sexy chunk to get people interested. I think that you all could benefit artistically from the front part. And we don't like rules, right? Who cares about rules? Gravity sucks. So this is an excerpt from All the Blue is Beige. Somewhere in this city of death and languor, someone is waiting. It had been so long since I felt this strange aching pull. There was another, long ago. I can always remember the rare one who saw me, whose eyes found me. In that moment, we were bound, however briefly. Those moments are as precious to me as they are painful. Brief flickers in the endless dark. She never understood, not fully. I mean, no one does. No one tries. Instead, most fear me as they would a recurrence of grief. I don't know what I am to them, but those moments, however fleeting, linger in the empty spaces like fragments of nostalgia. They're all I have, the only makers in the endless hours that surround me. And now, in this place where the city holds its breath along the creases of nightfall, I felt it again. Somewhere in this tangle of streets and secrets, there's someone who can see me, or perhaps someone who will. The realization sends a tremor through me, so slight it's almost painful, as though my long dead heart remembers how to beat. I move towards the pulse. The streets twist and turn, narrow paths that lead deeper into an urban meadow of broken stones, ivy-choked iron railings, and lamplights casting long skeletal shadows along the walls. The half-empty buildings loom over me, their windows dark, empty eyes watching my passage, indifferent, unmoved. These concrete streets were once little more than footpaths worn by countless bare feet weaving through dense forest. The land was wild then, untouched but alive with quiet knowing. The trees older than empires, the earth rich with stories. The first people to walk this soil moved through it gently. They saw the land as something sacred and left no scars. But then others came, carving their sharp lines and straight roads, hacking into the woods, pouring man-made stone into the soil. I watched as they built layer upon layer, burying what came before. They built higher and higher, hordes of glass towers clawing at the sky, enabling the inhabitants to ignore and discard unparalleled views from previously unfathomable heights. The structures built on this land were built and torn and remade again and again, each version colder than the last, farther from the quiet warmth it once held. I feel each of those changes like a fresh bruise. Ironically, the builders were and are blinded by their own vision. They couldn't see the ghostly remnants they'd so recklessly left behind. I made my way into an even older part of town. The scraggly plot of land is one of the few places left untouched by the relentless march of glass and steel. To most people, it's just an empty lot, an odd pocket of nothing, but I know what this place is, what it was meant to be. It was here, long before the settlers laid their foundations, where the first souls were laid to rest. Their bodies were wrapped in woven cloth. The delicate young earth was packed tightly around them. The weight of morning and the scent of solemn herbs drifted on the air. This was a place of reverence where spirits could linger, bound to the soil that remembered them. I remember when it was paved over, how the city officials said they moved the graves when they cleared the land for development, but I know better. They knew better. Not all who were buried here were taken. Many remain, hidden behind layers of asphalt, clay, and root. Humanity forgets, but the earth always remembers what it has lost. There's an old gate here, twisted and rusted, its bars swallowed by creeping vines that snake through the air like silent accusations. It stands ajar, leaning awkwardly like a drunkard propped against the shoulder of a friend long gone. It feels like a threshold, but not one meant for living feet. Still, I step through because thresholds are meant to be crossed. The gate groans faintly as I push it open, the rusted hinges screeching their descent, and the air changes immediately, slick and raw. It's a syrupy haze that clings to my skin in a way that makes me think of spoiled fruit and wet asphalt. The plot beyond is little more than a mess of tangled weeds and jagged stones. The city has forgotten this place, or perhaps it never noticed it at all. And I'm realizing I read the setup to the introduction, but I gave the introduction before the setup. So that's the setup. So we're in the apocalypse. Are we ready to keep going? Told you it gets a little poetic, a little heavy, but all because of Dark Queen of Chaos. Like, this is what this dame, like, she like broke me when we first met. So let's get broken. I turn, watching as a figure stumbles through the fog, blinking, lost. At first, she was just a shape, a smudge of movement against the gray haze, a shape breaking the symmetry of the mist. She moves with a unique hesitance through the overgrown lot, her boots crunching against the brittle remains of what once might have been flowers. She was tall, almost bird-like, her lissom frame swallowed by an oversized jacket that hung off her shoulders like armor too heavy to lift. Long hair spilled out from under a worn cap, sticking to her face in the damp air. She kept her hands close to her body as if any moment she might fall to pieces. Her steps faltered, and she stopped, looking around with an expression I couldn't quite place. Her gaze swept over the gravesite, taking in the shattered stones, and I knew that she felt it too, the wrongness of this place. But there was no fear in her eyes, only the quiet wariness of someone who had seen too much to worry anymore. She was standing by a half-collapsed mausoleum, her figure blurred by the swirling fog, and for a moment I thought she might disappear, dissolving into the mist like so many of my memories had, but she stayed, solid enough, though she didn't seem to belong here any more than the mausoleum did. I stepped closer, my own footfall breaking the silence. Her head snapped up, her eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her expression shifted, her brow furrowing as she studied me, and I felt her gaze as though she was peeling back the layers clung to me, searching for something solid underneath. It wasn't the first time I had seen her. Even before the world crumbled, before the sky became an endless canvas of gray, before the air thickened with dust and poison, she had been there, always just at the edge of my vision, a fleeting presence that never stayed long enough for me to grasp. I saw her in dreams, her eyes full of something I could never name. Her face would come to me in fragments, half-formed and slipping away the moment I reached for it. It was always the same. Eyes like quiet storms, her expression caught somewhere between fear and defiance, teetering on the edge of a decision too heavy for her shoulders. She'd linger in the periphery of my mind, a shadow at the corner of my consciousness, never close enough to grasp but impossible to forget. But those dreams lingered long after. Sleepless nights spent wrestling with my thoughts, the grind of a life that demanded everything and gave nothing in return. But the sightings didn't stop. If anything, they grew more frequent. There were days when I'd catch myself searching for her without meaning to, my eyes scanning crowds and subway stations, street corners. I never found her. In the chaos of the collapse, I thought I'd lose her in the calamity, but I thought the horrors of the new world, the bombings, the smoke, the endless waves of fire and fear would consume her like they consumed everything else, but they didn't. She stayed. Or maybe I stayed with her. So what I'm saying is I kind of dig this girl. Oh, thank you. Yes. So Dark Queen of Chaos was a lot of fun to get to know, and we became really, really good friends over the years. She's kind of like a sister that you'd want to like treat like a 50-cent buffet. You know, you just kind of eat until you're full. Sorry, that's right, CVG-TV. And by eat, I mean literally eat, as in cannibalism, because for some reason that's more socially acceptable than cunnilingus. Moving on. Yeah, you know, so there's this thing about bubbles, right? I'm gonna come downstairs. Wearing this particular costume, I feel a little bit like one of those televangelists from the 80s. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a televangelist, but I will accept donations. I'll even pray for you if you want. I don't know who I'm going to pray to, but if you want to throw cash at me, I'll say some words into the air, so by all means. But, as I was saying, we're all adults, and this whole notion that like cis-het fellas and cis-het ladies or straight guys and gay guys or all the other combinations can't get along platonically is insanity, right? Like, you have friends. Do you want to fuck all your friends?
Generally not.
Right. Do you want to fuck any of them?
I'll reserve comment.
There we go. See, no one wants to fuck their friends because as we all learned on Sesame Street, sex and friendship are mutually exclusive. Maybe you missed that episode. You should check it out. It's on HBO now, so they get a little bit more risque. I almost said their real name. But Dark Queen of Chaos, we had this kind of bond. It was one of those things where we met and we're like, oh, there's definitely some kind of alternate universe. There's some variant of us where like we are disgusting all the time. One of those couples that's just like always like moist for some reason. And they're always like looking at each other. Yes, like eating a cup of applesauce without a spoon. It's super gross. You can't look away, but you don't want to watch anyway. No, I did have a cup of applesauce without a spoon. So if you missed it, I'd be more than happy to give a repeat demonstration later on in the con. But we decided that the evolution of our relationship was one that was strictly platonic. And that's fantastic, because now I can write really, really gross things about her. And like, no, we're just friends. It's super cool. It's great. It's kind of like a safe way to be Harvey Weinstein without all the creepy, like, predatory stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right? When you think friendship, you think Harvey Weinstein. Who doesn't? No, he was a good guy, producer. Right? Is there something about Harvey that something happened in recent years? Is he not a good allegory anymore? Talking point 4, the futility of resistance. Now, I tried not writing. I have. I said, nope, not today, Satan. Well, okay, not Satan, but like a Satan-ish woman, right? Like heels and horns, tails. You know how what women look like. And then I'd find myself describing how the moon tastes when you're heartbroken, or how like betrayal looks when it's wearing black lipstick and like a tactical harness and that kind of stuff. And so you don't write for a muse. You write, or whatever your artistic endeavor is, you create to survive that muse. And so the reason why Dark Queen of Chaos and I are friends is because I do have this outlet. Like, Dark Queen and I are never going to get together physically, or romantically, or metaphysically. Or like, because remember that scene in Demolition Man where they put the headphones on and they're like kind of like doing the weird like 90s music video banging? Like, we're not gonna do that. That's weird. Also, I'm a little sensitive to like flashing lights, so that would be no bueno anyway. But in the pages of the book, we can be super gross. We can be super disgusting. Although this book is not super gross and disgusting. They never get together. So mild spoiler. There you go. The thing is, though, muses don't care about your schedule. They don't care about your day job. They don't care if you had a really bad piece of beef and now you're like pushing it out in the restroom or something like that. They're just gonna hit you when they wanna hit you, and you just kind of deal with it. And so talking point number 5. What have I learned? Absolutely nothing. Resisting a muse is kind of like trying to be on a diet at Mardi Gras. It's just not gonna work. So I just succumb to it. And in succumbing to it and embracing the idea, like, you know what? I'm gonna allow these people who enter my life to occupy all of my thoughts and then give them an outlet via the written word. I think I had a lot of fun with it, which brings us to talking point number 3. For those of you paying attention, I was not paying attention. I totally missed talking point number 3. We went right to 4 and 5. So we're gonna jump back around. It makes it seem like I'm a more gifted speaker than I am, which is to say I'm not at all. And so this is a lot of fun. So the muse evolves. This is talking point number 3. And we're gonna call this one Pinky. Pinky Flawless, because, you know, they should have a last name here. See, just when I thought I had healed and detoxed and changed the locks of my imagination, Pinky Flawless arrived. Now, Pinky Flawless is not just a bullshit name. It is an existence, an experience. It's a vibe, a brand, a way of life that requires glitter and danger and unshakable confidence in wearing like aviators at midnight. Like, so she has inspired Rain, who is the primary protagonist in Steel fucking Moon. And just a quick side note. So I got the idea for this book because I like heist stories. The Great Train Robbery, Ocean's 11, you know, when people take things that aren't theirs. And it's like, it would be really cool to have a science fiction story where they steal a huge celestial body like the moon. I had no idea that about 10 years ago, there was a children's film series called Despicable Me. And do you know what the plot of the first Despicable Me is? This character steals the fucking moon. Now, granted, he doesn't use the F word nearly as much in that film, I think. I mean, it is rated G, but it is just a coincidence. So if you're looking for some like Steve Carell fanfic, this is not the book for you. I'm trying to sell books. Yes, if you're looking for Steve Carell fanfic, you will definitely find something along those lines in here, probably, but not really. Yes, it's also the first of my 17 books in which I actually use any profanity, because I always try and write, like, there's no sex and there's no swearing. A lot of graphic violence, which I can go into a little bit deeper based on my background in broadcasting, but no swearing. But it was fun to be able to use the F word, and there are not one, not two, and not counting the title, but 3 instances of an uncensored F word. I know. That's amazing. It's so gross. So much fun to write. Actually, when I was writing out the different drafts, I would sometimes write it and then delete it just so I could write it again. A lot of fun. Yes. Quick side note about violence. Ooh, this is where I'm going to get a little bit preachy, so I should probably have like a handkerchief and like shaking something. They're always shaking stuff. Have you noticed that? Like they're always holding the like Bible or something, like shaking it and like wielding it like a weapon. But in all seriousness, the reason why I use graphic violence in some of my earlier novels, and this one too, real violence is horrific. It is repulsive, it is damaging, destroying, traumatic. But for whatever reason, in Western society, we like to glamorize it. We like to showcase it. Think of every action movie. Usually the coolest scene in that action movie is when someone is doing something absolutely barbaric to someone else. If you think about the 80s, Corocal Pictures put out a bunch of movies with Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and just going down lesser European big dudes. And they'd stab, punch, kick, fight, bite, slash, eviscerate, immolify. They'd do terrible things to other people, and we, as a collective audience, would cheer. The same thing with novels. One of my favorite novels is Anthony Burgess's The Clockwork Orange, which is a fantastically well-written book. The content of that book, however, is not necessarily fantastic. It's a little disturbing. It's a little graphic, a little messed up. And so my background in broadcasting, when I got off the road, I got a job sweeping floors and rewinding tapes for a little company called Afternight Studios, and then graduated up and I became a field producer for the NBC Afternoon News. My beat, which is just my assignment, what I covered, was missing persons and most wanted. And the joke was, no one's ever missing because they took a last minute vacation. No one's ever most wanted because they're just such a nice fucking guy. So got to see the darker sides of humanity. And the thing is, violence, real violence, it's not cool. It's not stylish. It's not hip. It's not awesome. The people who perpetuate it, they're not like awesome dudes who say one-liners. I mean, sometimes they do use one-liners, but that's only because they don't have the vocabulary to say something more profound or articulate. Fun fact, not really a sidebar, but on my beat during a Most Wanted segment, the cops had just done a raid of a housing project where they had been selling a bunch of drugs. And the thing is about TV is you have to get this thing called a release. It's just a piece of paper that says, you agree to let us put your face and name on television. There's a gentleman in handcuffs being walked out by the cops. My boss is like, you gotta get some talking heads, you gotta get some people on camera. So I'd go, very young, nice and hip, mid-20s, energetic, hadn't quite aged or found out how delicious Skittles taste by the pound. And I went up and I said, this is kinda weird, but we'd love to get a statement. And he was like, sure thing. And I was like, okay, just so you know, we are gonna put your face and your name on television. He's like, oh, that's awesome. Then all my homeboys will watch it. And it's like, okay, just so you understand though, you are being taken into custody because you have been selling all this propaganda and all these drugs and all this other stuff. He's like, yeah, it's all good, it's all good. I was like, and anything you say is allowed to be used in court if they're gonna like press charges. He's like, yeah, it's cool. I was like, okay. And so the cops like turned him around and he like signed the waiver. I was like, cool. I was like, so the Chicago police have now like raided this building. You're one of the suspects as part of this ring that's been selling all this dope and doing all these things. And he's like, look, man, like people sell dope all the time. Am I in trouble because I'm selling dope? No, of course I'm selling stuff. You got to make a living. And I was like, you are admitting to a felony on TV, but keep going because it's good reading. And he's like, and he did. He kept going. Now the best part of this story is that much later, when I moved to the Twin Cities, I just happened to be at a traffic light where someone was making a traffic stop, and I was close enough, my windows down, I could overhear the conversation. It wasn't the same person, but in spirit, I think like his essence had like traveled the 420 miles all the way from Chicago, because the only part of the conversation I heard before the light changed and I drove away was, and I'm gonna quote, so apologies kids, he was like, what the fuck, man? You calling me a drug dealer? I don't deal the drugs, I don't cut no deals. My customers pay straight cash for my shit. which that kind of honesty in commerce, I did respect. I was like, okay, there's no false advertising here. But bringing that back full circle, so the reason why I got out of broadcasting, and oh man, it is only 12 in the afternoon, so we probably should have put like trigger warnings on this, shouldn't we? Oh man, oh well. Anyway, I'll do a cleaned up version. But I found the remnants of a young lady who had been kidnapped by her father who had a restraining order, and rather than, they issued an Amber Alert, and then rather than, I don't know, doing anything else, taking her back to school, dropping her off at the police station, turning himself in, he decided to strangle her to death, dismember her body, and throw the parts along the highway. And so I got that lovely call in the newsroom, like, oh, the cops have found the young lady. You can go out there. And I was like, great. Now, I already know at this point that when you find a missing person, usually what happens is that you're not going to interview the person they've recovered. You're going to go talk to the people who recovered what's left of them. So I was already bracing myself for that. And I got to the crime scene. I was like, great. Coroner's already there. The Emmy's doing their thing. So there's like, they have covers on the ground. And like you can't see anything gnarly. You knew something was messed up, but like you didn't actually see it. So I'm like walking up, like thinking like this is great. I'm unscathed. I don't have to see anything. And I stepped on something, and it was a hand. And I was like, hey, that's fucked up. No more for me. So violence is gross. Violence is not fun. I can still enjoy violence. I love horror movies, like tear people apart because it's all good and fun. But for my own work, I want to make sure that people understand that violence is reprehensible. And so all the descriptions in my work are extremely clinical, they're not stylized, and we go into I go into very, not explicit detail, but just enough to know like this isn't fun. I don't linger on how cool the person is that is committing the violence so much as how traumatized the person is that has had the violence committed against them. Which sounds like I'm trying to unsell my books, but here's the thing. The violence is really small. It's just small pieces. Hey, there's a camera. Look, totally natural, completely candid photograph. Whoops. So with Steal the Moon, I also wanted to do something I'd never done before, which is try to be funny, because I'm not funny. Comedy is like horror. It's hard to scare people, and it's hard to make them laugh. And it's really hard to scare someone into laughing, just like it's hard to make someone laugh so much they become frightened, though it has happened on occasion. I'm a huge fan, and I can get some cheap applause lines. Like I like guys like Terry Pratchett. No Terry Pratchett fan? And like Douglas Adams. And other writers from like Minnesota. Yes. But I never tried to emulate them because I thought what they did was so brilliant. Douglas Adams has a fantastic line, it's the greatest collection of words in the English language ever put in print, where he says, for a while something happened, and then for a moment later nothing continued to happen. That is just goddamn brilliance. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm not gonna try that. But what I will do is try and write the stories that I'd wanna see and that I haven't found. And that's what brought me to Steal the Effing Moon. Sorry, more candid photos, completely natural. I always stand like this. So with Steal the Effing Moon, it's about Rain and Cygnus who are trying to steal the moon because takes place in the far future, but I tried to inject a little bit more humor into it. Sorry, all this candid photography is making me misplace my readers. Isn't that crazy? Anyone here, show of hands, anyone remember the 80s? Okay. So the thing is, I found that as someone else who remembers the 80s, there's been this conspiracy in the last 5-10 years to make print smaller and squigglier. It's not me, clearly. But over the years, as every year goes by, the print gets smaller and squigglier. So I've had to start wearing readers. It's all, thanks Obama, right? This guy. So I'll read a handful of excerpts from Steal the Effing Moon. Again, breaking the rule, we're gonna read from chapter 1 because it's more fun that way. The moon was no longer a place of wonder, no longer a symbol of dreams. It was owned, parceled into corporate sectors, its dust priced per gram, its craters leased to men who already had more than they could ever spend. Rain Pearson wasn't interested in the moon. She was interested in getting as far away from it as possible before the people chasing her turned her ship into a very brief and very painful fireworks display. In the cockpit was a raucous cathedral of alarms. Red lights blinked with the urgency of overeager salesmen, every screen flashing dire predictions of impending catastrophe. The ship lurched violently, and somewhere deep in the hull, something very expensive made a sound like a wrench in a tumble dryer. Cygnus, Rain wrestled with the control yoke. Mind the rear flank. I'd prefer it if we didn't explode today. Cygnus Hampton, seated next to her and frantically trying to coax more speed out of a system designed with the exact opposite in mind, didn't look up from his console. Oh, certainly. I'll just ask the lovely people shooting at us to reconsider their life choices. Another blast shook the ship, and Rain's control panel helpfully informed her that the left stabilizer was now significantly less stable. Jump ports dead ahead, Cygnus said, not quite as cheerful as she would have liked. If we make it through, we're home free. If we make it through, Rain muttered, dodging another volley of pulse fire. The enforcers were persistent. She had to give them that. 3 ships, sleek and much better maintained than theirs, were gaining fast. One of them had just acquired missile lock, which was a phrase that Rain disliked on principle. The missile alarm blared. Come on, Cygnus, Rain exhaled through her nose. Tell me we have some kind of countermeasures. Well, Cygnus winced. Would you like the truth or a comforting lie? Surprise me. Well, we have no countermeasures whatsoever. That's not my favorite surprise. Now, the missile streaked towards them, a rapidly approaching manifestation of poor life choices. Rain didn't think of herself as reckless, because reckless people made stupid decisions. Rain, on the other hand, made intelligent, highly experimental decisions that occasionally resulted in property damage. This was one of them. She yanked the control yoke hard to starboard, then cut power entirely for exactly 3 seconds, just long enough to drop their trajectory and convince the missile's targeting system that it had somehow misplaced an entire ship. The missile, having been programmed with a reasonable expectation of reality, took a moment to register that its target was no longer where it was supposed to be. It hurtled forward, very confident in its own momentum, still fully convinced it was about to achieve great things. It did not. Instead, it sailed harmlessly overhead, missing them by meters. A moment later, a particularly unobservant enforcer pilot who had, up until that point, been extremely enthusiastic about the chase, found himself in the unfortunate position of occupying the exact same space that the missile had been planning to occupy a fraction of a second later. There was a brief, almost poetic pause. Then the ship, the missile, and approximately $17 billion worth of cutting-edge military engineering came to the mutual realization that physics was a cruel and unforgiving mistress. The blast wave hit Rain's ship like an overenthusiastic handshake, rocking the cabin hard enough to send a flickering shower of distressed-looking sparks across the control panel. Cygnus, who had been attempting to reroute power to the failing thrusters, stared wide-eyed at the fireball on the view screen. Nice, Cygnus gave a low whistle. I'm going to pretend that was intentional. It was absolutely intentional, Rain lied, flipping the thrusters of low power. Cygnus turned to her slowly. You're telling me that you did that on purpose? I mean, Rain said, more or less. All right, Cygnus exhaled long and slow, rubbing a hand on his face. I have got to stop letting you drive. Well, about that jump port, it's right there, Cygnus confirmed. Still a ways out, but it's our best shot at surviving this. The glowing ring of the jump port light hovered in the near distance. The publicly accessible artificial wormhole was more than a way to traverse astonishing distances instantaneously. It was a gateway to Astraeus, where enforcers had no jurisdictions and corporations had to file actual paperwork before trying to kill you, which made it ideal, except for the part, of course, where they had to actually reach it. The remaining 2 enforcer ships were adjusting their formation, spreading out to flank them. One was pushing forward, moving to block their entry vector. Rain's eyes flicked to a floating maintenance drone, drifting like an abandoned thought right in their path. A plan formed. It was terrible, but that was true of most of her plans, and they usually worked out eventually. Cygnus, she said, her voice even, when I say now, I need you to hit the boosters. What? He followed her gaze. Oh no, absolutely not. Yes. No. Cygnus, this is reckless even for you. Cygnus, Rain said, leveling him with a look that carried the exact amount of confidence required to be deeply concerning. Do you trust me? Cygnus inhaled slowly, then exhaled even slower, like a man coming to terms with the fact that the answer was going to haunt him. Yes, he sighed, his shoulders sagging, more than I probably should. Then get ready. It was not, strictly speaking, the most reassuring series of words to hear when hurtling through space at unsafe speeds with heavily armed pursuit ships on your tail, but ahead of them a drone loomed larger, a forgotten maintenance relic drifting lazily in the void, completely unaware that it was about to become an impromptu obstacle course. The enforcer ships closed in, engines flaring hot as they moved to box them in. Their pilots had almost the distinct advantage of flying state-of-the-art interceptors designed for high-speed pursuit and tactical superiority. Rain and Cygnus, on the other hand, were piloting something that had barely passed maintenance inspection and was currently being held together almost entirely by sheer willpower and questionable patchwork. This was going to be very close. Rain counted down in her head. 3. The drone drifted into perfect alignment. 2. The enforcers adjusted their attack formation. 1. Now! Cygnus slammed on the booster control and the ship leapt forward like a startled cat hurtling toward the drone at a speed that suggested deep personal resentment for the concept of self-preservation. He made a noise somewhere between a shriek and a prayer, which Rain chose to ignore. The drone rushed up to meet them, filling the viewport with its uneven, jagged frame, exposing plating, loose wiring, entirely too many sharp-looking edges. It was very much the sort of thing you didn't want to fly through at a high velocity. Rain waited. She waited some more. And then, at the absolute last possible second, she yanked the controls, rolling the ship into a razor-thin maneuver beneath the drone, skimming through a gap that no sane person would have even considered attempting. The enforcer ships on their tail were significantly less fortunate. The first ship clipped the drone, lost control, and spun wildly into the other one, which had, until now, been perfectly intact. They both exploded, flinging metallic and biological debris out in every direction. Rain didn't even look back. She was already lining up the jump, the glowing ring of the jump port ahead of them, shining with the promise of not getting arrested or executed today. It worked, didn't it? She said deadpan. Cygnus turned to look at the rapidly expanding fireball in their rear cinches, then back at her, then at the fireball, then back at her. All right, not bad. Now hold on, Rain said, punching the throttle. This next part might be a little bumpy. Jump field's engaging, Cygnus said, relief creeping into his voice. Rain allowed herself a half second of satisfaction. Then a new alarm blared. And we turned the page. Cygnus, she said slowly. Why is the jump sequence flashing red? Oh no, his eyes widened. That's not good. That alarm means that the jump wasn't properly calculated. It was probably deactivated when we pushed the thrusters but his words were cut short as the universe tilted sideways and everything vanished. Yes, that was the first chapter of Still the Effing Moon. I mean, spoiler, they don't die in the first chapter. Although now I'm like, oh man, that would have been really cool. I should have totally just killed him. And then after just like 3,000 words, I kind of like, here's my novel. And people would say, oh my God, this sucks. It's so short. It's just one scene. I'm like, no, you don't get it. It's like super deep. It's like a Jim Jarmusch film or like anything J-Lo does. It's like, you just don't understand it. It's not because it sucks. Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to Jennifer Lopez. In fact, if she's watching by some chance, yeah, I'm in room 2230 something. Just come on up. Got some gummy bears. We'll have a drink. Watch some cartoons, as the kids say. The kids don't say that anymore, do they? That's a shame. I think that cartoons should be synonymous with adult activities, don't you? So not to ask anything personal, but like we've all had those moments where you're watching like, I don't know, Tailspin, and then Gadget comes on the screen, and you're like, I know she's a cartoon, but I'm just saying, if she wasn't a cartoon or if like Toontown was real. Which, by the way, if you go to Disney World, Toontown is a goddamn lie. There are no cartoons walking around. It's dudes in suits. Did you know that the whole time? Although, fun fact, they can't say stuff from other properties. I got to meet Peter Pan, or the actor playing Peter Pan. I was like, oh, I love Peter Pan. We should get a picture. So naturally, he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, we should say bangarang. And he was like, no. And I was like, what? You can't say no. I was like, come on, let's do this. We're just bangarang. And he was like, nah, dude, can't say it. I was like, you can't call me dude, you're Peter Pan. And he's like, look, that's from Amblin Entertainment. It's not Disney. We can't say bangarang. I was like, you're Peter Pan. He's like, yeah, but I'm not gonna get fired. I was like, fair. I wouldn't get fired over me either. Also, by the way, if you do happen to be in Disneyland, I was just there in the spring, so I got a lot of Disneyland material. Their Star Wars people don't know Star Wars. Yeah, there was a young guy dressed up like one of the rebellion people, and as you go through, he'd say cool stuff like, may the force be with you. May the force be with you. And then he saw me and say, hey, yeah, force be, live long and prosper. And I was like, no, you do not say that. That's our word. You can't say that. That's no good. For those of you unfamiliar with the Space Wizards with Laser Swords franchise versus the single greatest science fiction property of all time known as Star Trek, there are certain sayings that we Trekkies can use that the Star Warriors were not allowed to, okay? I can't think of any other parallels in the lexicon or speech. There's nothing else that comes to mind. I did try to get my friend to wear blackface because it doesn't count at con. At least that's what he told me. But I think we can get him to do it, right? So all you guys watching at home, use a hashtag. I'll use a fake name. Scott, wear blackface. Scott, wear blackface. Got a hashtag, Scotty, wear blackface. I'll stay next to you the whole time. That way people won't get too mad. I won't. I would leave in a second. That'd be hilarious. How funny would that be? He was like, no, it's okay. My black friend told me it was cool. Because that would help. Yeah. But yes, so basically, the moral of the story is like, if you like Star Trek, you can appreciate the wizards with the laser swords, but don't let them take our words. We've suffered long enough. Like we had a big struggle in the 60s, and we're not quite there yet, but we're seeing the promised land. Soon there will be nothing but Trek, and all will be well. I had a dream, actually, the other day. This isn't disrespectful at all. I had a dream that, my two daughters who like How to Train Your Dragon and Sailor Moon could go play in the fields with kids who like One Piece and Pokemon, and they would not be judged by the content of their fandoms, but just by the fact that we're all fucking nerds here. But until that day, fuck Star Wars. You guys are losers. You're black and white. You got no nuance. It's all about Trek, and more Trek. Yeah, all that goodwill. Yes. So about my book. The romantic clef part. So Rain is based on Pinky Flawless because I met Pinky Flawless in a very weird way. We had a very awkward first hangout. We met online, which, the thing about meeting people online, I know a lot of people have met people online, but the thing about meeting people online, if you are lonely, is that there's two kinds of people online. There are liars and people who are dumb enough to believe their lies. Don't go online. There's a reason why they're online. It's gross. I know I'm losing a lot of goodwill here. I can see the faces like, what? Fuck you, dude. Like, I love my... Like, no. Like, it's creepy. It's weird. The internet is a dangerous place. If you don't believe me, turn off Safe Search and Google anything. And that'll tell you. Which, not to go too tangential, but like, what's the deal with OnlyFans? Like, because if you Google anything with the Safe Search off, don't you get the same results as giving someone your credit card number? It's pretty gnarly. But we met online, but we met as friends. I thought we were friends, and then we decided we should hang out because we have so much in common, and it's going to be really, really fun to spend time with a new person that you're like excited to hang out with. They misinterpreted that as something a little bit more romantic, a little bit more carnal, and halfway through our hangout, I was like, oh no, I wonder if she thinks that this is a date. And then I come to find out later, she thought halfway through what she thought was a date was, oh no, I wonder if he thinks we're just hanging out as friends, which is a lovely meet cute. Kind of, except it wasn't that cute and we'd already met. So it was a lovely, like, known fugly? Yeah, it was a known fugly. That's a term. And over time, we became friends. That was the basis for a beautiful friendship. The pinky, by the way, comes from the old Southern expression describing certain relationships. So you would see someone like, oh my God, like, look at those two. I tell you, they're thick as thieves right there. Them fellas there, thick as thieves. So it's that kind of, so sometimes my grandmother, who was a lovely Southern woman, would say little things like that. And every so often she'd say, oh, well, I know they say they're just friends, but tell you what, that boy, that's a pinky toe right there. And I was like, well, what's a pinky toe? It's like, well, like, you don't think about it too much, but at some point late at night, they're going to bang on every piece of furniture. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So this is Pinky. So right now, Pinky and I are very innocuous, but who knows? Sometime later tonight, might end up banging on the table. That's the origin of the name. And so that's where, yeah, my grandma was great. And this really has nothing to do with the book, but we're almost at oh yeah, we can just float for a while. You guys heard me read already, so I've done my due diligence. My grandma had great stuff. She taught me to play this game called Who Won, which as a kid I thought was hilarious. You look at a couple, whether or not they were romantically involved or not, you had no idea. There's two people walking together, and you try and figure out which one won, as in which one was just a fucking bridge troll who was walking with like this god or goddess. I thought that was a fun game. That game is mean as shit. That is so mean. It's so mean, but it's a lot of fun. And still, I catch myself doing it now. Like, kind of look around, and everyone here who has friends that have significant others or like people in their lives, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, like wow, you did really, really well for yourself. How the fuck did you do that? And other times you have friends that have other people, and you're like, oh man, are you okay? Like, you can do so much better. And you should absolutely tell them that as often as possible, because nothing holds a friendship together more than honesty, right? Like, I had a thing, and they're here. I have people that will vouch for the validity. This isn't like a stand-up bit. I'm not a stand-up comic. I just share true stories. Thought it would be really hilarious to get a tattoo of a name. Now, no judgment against the ink that you choose to get. It's a personal decision. For me personally, I would never get anyone's name tattooed on me. It's not my thing. However, I do think it would be goddamn hilarious to get the tattoo of a friend's wife's name, because that's a goddamn icebreaker. I mean, is anyone here married to a woman? No? Yeah? So if you went to your buddy's house and he had a tattoo of your wife's name, You wouldn't let that go like unnoticed. You'd say something, right? Conversation starter. No more awkward lulls. No more weird pauses to fill the gaps. Like, oh, what are we talking about? You'd be like, what the fuck is that? That's kind of cool, right? Are you married? If a friend of yours had your spouse's name tattooed, especially someplace nice and like Undertaker, like right across the neck, right there, big old English, or like Tupac, like the crazy like beer letters across there's his tummy, you might have a question or two. Yeah, but the thing about songs is you get plausible deniability with a song. Like so many songs, like the Rolling Stones back in the 70s used to pass their fans around like a cigarette, like a marijuana cigarette. You can tell I'm super hip because I call them marijuana cigarettes. And they would write songs, and you know that like Mick would go home. Like there's a duet he did with David Bowie, and if you haven't seen this video, please go to YouTube and check it out. I have never seen two people who have clearly been fucking each other's brains out. It's so obvious that Mick Jagger and David Bowie, they knew each other not just like intimately, but like anatomically. These guys are like in each other. Like I don't know who is the Kermit and who is the Jim. Yeah, there you go. But there is definitely some Muppeting going on. But there's still plausible deniability because, they went home and David's like, no, I just Mick and I were having a good time. Nope, don't feel like sitting right now. It's okay. Gonna stand for a bit. Yeah, there you go. You caught that one. That's a nasty joke. And that's how you get past all the censors for CVG. But back to Pinky, Pinky Flawless. I needed a character, and we joke a lot. She actually is, I can't say what she is now because that gives away who she is, I suppose. But we are involved in other artistic endeavors together. And we have lots of conversations like, oh, we should travel. And like, as we travel and do these things together, it's like we come up with these crazy scenarios. Like, it'd be cool. Like, oh, look, there's cows. And, there's like cow tipping. What if there's like cow stacking? Like, that's way more inconvenient for the farmer. I mean, way more hard logistically, but that's a funnier prank. Or like cow peanut buttering, right? Because cows are big. So if you've got like a lot of peanut butter and you're on a road trip and you're bored, here, we're all Midwesterners. Imagine you're on a dairy farm. You're like, oh, it's been a hard day, Liza, because your wife's name is Liza, because you're a dairy farmer, and that's the rules. I don't make them up. And you wake up the next morning like, it's time to milk the cows, because when you're a dairy farmer, that's what you do, at least according to TV. You wake up, milk cows. Or you put those weird like hand job machines that are all silver, and they milk the cows. But still, you have to wake up and start the machine, or else the cows can't get their HJ to get all the lovely cow juice. And so you go out there, and then your prize bovine. Cows are bovine, right? Yeah. Not porcine, because porcine is like police officers, right? Yeah, there you go. We get the bovine. Hey, thanks. I'm here all week. I am actually, because convergence. And your prize bovine is covered in Skippy. That's funny. That's just funny. No, nobody? Or more condiment humor, because it's a subject that hasn't been broached up. If you ever find yourself in a questionable neighborhood, a lot of times you hear self-defense classes. They say like women walking alone at night should keep their keys in their fists, kind of like Wolverine claws, or have a whistle, walk in pairs. Gentlemen should like keep their head on a swivel, that kind of thing, or like, make sure that you have a distance. If someone starts approaching you, you can do all kinds of stuff. You don't need to do all that. It's a lot of work. What you need, it's very simple. It's two things. It'll cost you about $3.68. You need one spoon. It can be silver, can be plastic, can be biodegradable, compostable, but you need a spoon. The other thing you need is a jar of mayonnaise. If you walk in any neighborhood in any of the 50 states with a jar of mayonnaise and a spoon, it doesn't matter what time of night it is, doesn't matter how bad the neighborhood is, no one is going to fuck with you. Would you fuck with someone who you saw like voraciously consuming a jar of mayonnaise? If you're on the subway, you're on the E train in New York City, it's 2 a.m, you're a little tipsy, and there's a guy sitting across from you in the train car just absolutely going to town on a jar of Milk Whip, not breaking eye contact. You're not fucking with that guy, or effing with that guy. Not at all. Yeah, you're getting off the train. You can use that. That's right. I know this is supposed to be artistic, and you're supposed to hear about my books, but I'm trying to help. It's just my way of giving back. So even tonight, if you're not from the Twin Cities, you want to go explore, and you might have heard of our like kind of disparaging nickname of Murderapolis, which it's not true. Murderapolis is just something that people who are afraid of brown folks have like labeled the city. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Aw. And I know you guys can't see this, but that's not even brown people clapping. We're winning. Go Star Trek. Ooh. But if you want to explore the city and you're not sure what the neighborhoods, there is. If you go out the doors of the hotel and you cut a hard left that takes you north, North Minneapolis has a reputation. But if you are worried, jar of mayonnaise and a spoon, right? Absolutely. He knows what I'm talking about. And don't worry about what happens when you consume it, because you're like, well, yeah, I'll be safe for like that 15-minute train ride, but then like I have to deal with the fact that I ate a jar of mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is like mostly eggs, right? And then if life begins at conception, then we're just eating life. Because we all started as eggs. I think I missed a couple of days of sex ed, but this is the gist. And so just eating eggs, like the question is, like, is it cannibalism if you're eating yourself? This was a conversation we had last night, that if you were in an accident and they had to amputate something and you asked the doctor, hey, could you just like fillet my leg to try it? You could try some long pig for reals. Is that cannibalism if it's self-cannibalism? Oh, that was a solid yes. Is that a yes from experience? Like, you're not invited to Christmas parties anymore? But those are the kind of thoughts. This is called padding for time, by the way. I'm supposed to open this up for questions, but I'm a little nervous about what the questions might be, considering the spectrum of topics that we've covered and how many toes I may have stepped on. But I will open it for questions. How's it going? It doesn't have to be about my books or my background, just questions in general. Someone asked me once where the clitoris was, and I said it's pronounced clitoris, and that became an entire discussion. Actually, even you guys at home who are voting, show of hands in the room, is it clitoris? There's one for clitoris, or clitoris. All right, that's good. That's a tough one. These are the questions that they don't have see, it's all this damn fake media. Trump is right. See, these are the questions that our journalists need to be asking. This is what matters. Yes, question in the back.
I want to know what happened that made you hate Star Wars so much, or what made you choose Star Trek over Star Wars? What defining moments?
I mean, like any good moment, I didn't choose Star Trek chose me. So technically the first film I remember seeing in theaters, first film I ever went to in a theater was Return of the Jedi. Now, I don't know this, I've been told this because I was like 3-ish, 4-ish years old. And like, oh yeah, and I kind of vaguely remember Salacious Crumb and Jabba, but also like I'm aware of Salacious Crumb and Jabba now, so I don't know if I actually remember that or just kind of like nostalgia blindness and filling in those gaps. But the first movie I remember seeing in theaters is Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, which is an infinitely superior film. It's the second part of a trilogy. I know people like to poop on like the odd numbered films, but if you watch 2, 3, and 4 back to back, that's one story arc across 3 films separated by 6 years. That's actually kind of genius that they were able to pull that off. Granted, Search for Spock is not the strongest by itself, and they do heavily imply that Saavik banged Spock on that planet. For those who don't remember, the Genesis planet is where Spock's body was sent, and then because of the regenerative properties of that planet, it brings Spock back to life. But he starts as a child and starts growing older. So David Marcus, Kirk's son, and Saavik, the Vulcan lieutenant, are down on the surface looking for Spock. They find him, and he's about 13, 14, and there's a scene where young Spock is just kind of grunting. He's like, "Urgh," he's like sweating, "Urgh," and it cuts back to the Enterprise. It's like, what's going on down there? And Lieutenant Saavik says, oh, he's experiencing Pon farr, but it's okay, I'll help him. Then it cuts to the next scene. So those of you not laughing, Pon farr is like when Vulcans like watch cartoons. So what Saavik is implying, it's a little disturbing, because they literally just go to the next scene and leave it hanging. So I mean, with cinematic gems like that, Star Wars can't compete. I mean, fucking sand and the guy kissing his sister. Like, at least Star Trek was classy enough to just imply there's some statutory action happening on Genesis. Like A New Hope, like Luke and Leia are getting all icky, and then, no. Also, in all seriousness, it's because Star Wars is a black and white binary. It is a remake of a lot of old westerns and old serials, which George Lucas himself said he was doing. He was like inspired by the stuff he watched as a kid, which were the old westerns and serials. You had the black hat and the white hat, aka the dark side of the Force, the light side of the Force. Up until the, was it Rogue One and some of the sequel trilogy, there wasn't really any nuance. Empire, bad, because they're bad. Rebels, even though they're a religious cult that steals children to fight for their cause, but they're the good guys, and that's it. Yeah, if you watch the prequels, how do they get new Jedi? Sounds a lot like the Taliban to me. They say, hey, your kid's special. He's going to come live with us. He can never see his family again. He can never have any kind of relationships, no connections. We're going to train him to fight for our cause because our religion's the only true religion. Those are the good guys. But Chewie's cool. Chewie gave me a hug in Disneyland. And I know I'm a hardcore Trekkie, and I should have said no, but when Chewie comes in, I mean, come on, it's Chewie. He's like a giant merkin. You gotta just grab that thing, right? You remember the 70s? Everyone was hugging Chewie back in the day. I am really skirting the line there. So hugging a Chewie, when I'm replying, it's brushing hair. Okay, so if there's any kids watching, yeah, I'm killing the cameraman. I love that. That's like that. You're gonna use all these. You go home, because you're the married one. You go home and say, hey, sweetie, I just want to make sure that my buddy doesn't have your name tattooed on him. But when I get back, I want to hug that Wookiee. I have time for one more question. Yes.
You normally come up with like storyline first and then characters, or have you ever created or thought of like character first and created a story?
Oh my God. So with the muses, so these last 4 books, it was the characters first. Like with Pinky Flawless and all of our silly conversations about what if we put peanut butter on a cow, I was like, oh my God, it would be actually really fun. What if we had 2 weird characters who were based on Pinky and somewhat me doing weird stuff? What's the weirdest, dumbest thing we can do? Like, oh, what if they're trying to steal, I don't know, like the moon? Or with Dark Queen of Chaos, I was like, man, what if we had to meet and hang out while the world was literally burning around us? What kind of hijinks would we get up to? Prior to that, it really was just about ideas. So I write a lot of what I can't find, because Toni Morrison, I'm gonna get serious. I know I've been talking about mayonnaise, but Toni Morrison, great writer. If you haven't read her, definitely go check her out. Has a great quote that if there's a story you wanna read, but you can't find, then you must write it. And I love that quote, because for so often I couldn't find stuff. My very first book, which was based on this idea for a TV show I had, it ended up being called Teleportality. Originally it's called Billy. And because all of my heroes were female, like presenting. Love Wonder Woman, loved Uhura, loved Ripley from Aliens. I love strong female characters. But the thing I hated, and still to this day I'm not really a big fan of, are love interests. It slows down the story, and it's painted differently, as I mean, everyone here is aware. Like the way that they present female characters with a love interest is decidedly different than how they present male characters with a love interest. Because with male characters, it's almost like a trophy. Like, you have saved the day, here is your prize. With female characters, it's sort of like an accessory, and it kind of slows the story down. It doesn't really make sense, or at least I haven't seen stuff where it's like, it never adds to the narrative. So what I did was I crafted this character the name is literally Billy Badass, and she is a badass. And I got to the point that I did get to pitch it to a network. I don't want to name their name, but it's 3 letters, and they do things about like bringing the box office to your house. It's crazy. But we got to have a meeting, and they were like, we like this idea, we like this concept, because the whole thing was talking about like, if no one could die, if you could become medically immortal, then the government has a never-ending tax base. But you have someone now who's trying to fight for the right to die, because she doesn't want to be here. She's been brought back against her will, and then she has to take on this tyrannical government and all this other fun stuff. And they're like, oh, we like these concepts, it'd be kind of really fun, but we need her to like do something. And I was like, well, what do you mean do something? Well, we want a love interest. I think that would sell it better. And I was like, well, there's not really any place in the story for a love interest. Like, well, what about the opening scene? Now, for those of you who haven't read my first novel, Teleportality, the scene opens with Billy being chased on her motorcycle by basically a tank who was shooting at her and blowing up cars and blowing up stuff. And they were like, yeah, this is where the love scene should go. So I'm like, okay, she's being chased by a tank, so she pulls over and bangs a guy. They're like, well, maybe she grabs someone when there's an explosion, and then they go hide somewhere, and then that's when, it gets romantic. I was like, there's nothing romantic. Also, I don't know if you missed the hook of this, but she's dead. And that's gross. I mean, I don't kink shame. Whatever you're into, have fun. But if you're banging corpses, that's a little left of center just my 2 cents. I know I'm a bit of a prude, I'm old fashioned, but I just think banging dead bodies is just a little ick.
There's a consent issue.
There is a consent issue, thank you. And I am all about consent. So that's where that came. So that idea was basically, I hadn't seen a female character that wasn't beholden to different tropes, specifically like love interest and that kind of thing. A lot of other stuff. I tried to do a horror novel called Shadow of the Valley, which was like, my friends and I like to scare each other with dumb ideas. Like, we don't actually like scare each other, but like, if you took half the things that we discussed and brought them to reality, it's pretty terrifying. And so like, well, what if my knucklehead friends from high school had to fight actual demons? And the fun part was like, well, the demons would win. So I got to kill all my friends from high school. So that was a lot of fun. And actually, as we're just at time, my favorite source of inspiration, my second novel is called Dragon Variation. Yes, I'm that nerdy. I named my book after my favorite chess opening, the Sicilian Dragon. Hell yeah, Kasparov forever. But my kid, who at that time was very, very, very little, we were just running errands, and out of nowhere, because you know how kids are, she was like, hey, if you eat a wizard, do you become a wizard? And I think in her mind, she was kind of conflating like vampires or zombies or something, but she just said wizard, and I was like, whoa, that's awesome. I don't know, but I love that idea, which then evolved into this idea of like people with superpowers, and because like, you know how carnivores taste gamey because they eat meat, and then herbivores taste better. And I was like, well, what if someone has superpowers, and if you eat their superpowers, you get their superpowers? And then that kind of devolved into more of like an exploitation thing, and it became an allegory for class and race in America, you know, as these things do. And so inspiration comes from kind of everywhere, but recently I've just been having a lot of fun putting my friends in the books directly, and I tell them about it beforehand. I do get consent. I say, hey, I have this idea for a book. I want this character based on you. Is that cool? And then so far I've gotten 0 no's. Everyone's been like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Now granted, most of them say yes before I've written the book. But to be fair, they haven't fought me yet. And I can just say it's for you. I can always change it. Say, oh, you know, I was going to base it on you, but now it's actually based on anyone else. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this hour. Don't forget # Scotty loves blackface. Yes.